All right, welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're going to dive into one of the biggest questions out there. What is consciousness? But here's the twist. We're not going to treat it like some unsolvable mystical puzzle. Instead, we're going to unpack the grand scientific story of how it actually likely evolved.
So let's just get right to it. What is it? That subjective inner feeling of being you. It's a question that has kept philosophers and scientists up at night for centuries. It's often called one of the last great frontiers of science. But what if we've been looking at the whole thing from the wrong angle?
And that wrong angle might just be thinking of consciousness as some kind of fundamental magic ingredient of the universe. So here's the core idea for this entire explainer. Consciousness isn't stuff. It's a solution. It's a tool that life evolved to solve a very real, very specific problem. It's an adaptive, emergent strategy for control. To really understand this tool, we have to rewind the clock way, way back. The journey to a conscious mind, believe it or not, starts with the origin of life itself. And as we're about to see, that story is really a story of pure, unguided chemistry.
Okay, so this really demystifies that very first step. Picture the early Earth. You've got intense UV light from the sun. You've got cycles of wet and dry. And under these conditions, basic chemical reactions just start to happen. Nobody's planning them. And out of this sort of chemical chaos, the building blocks for RNA start to form all on their own. No design needed. It was just chemistry doing what chemistry does, following the path of least resistance.
So you've got these RNA building blocks floating around. And at the very same time, other simple molecules, fatty acids, are just naturally forming these little bubbles, or vesicles. You can think of them as the first super primitive cells. Now, by pure dumb luck, some of these bubbles happen to trap those replicating RNA polymers inside. This wasn't a plan, it was just a random encounter. And in that one incredibly unlikely moment, the first system with heritability was born. The ability to pass on information had just blinked into existence. Okay, so once you have heritability, that ability to pass traits down, a brand new and unbelievably powerful force enters the picture. And that force is Darwin's creative engine. Now, this is a really, really important point, and it's a huge misconception for a lot of people. Evolution doesn't give an organism what it needs. That's not how it works. In fact, a famous experiment, the Luria-Delbruck test, proved that mutations, these little variations in the genetic code, happen completely at random, by chance. They happen before the environment ever puts any pressure on the organism. The variation comes first, and it's blind. And that, right there, is the secret sauce. Because you have this constant supply of random heritable variation, natural selection suddenly has something to work with. It acts like a filter, right? It just favors the variations that happen to be useful and gets rid of the ones that aren't. And you just let that simple process run for millions and millions of years, and it becomes this incredible engine for building mind-boggling biological complexity. So this engine of complexity is just chugging along, building more and more elaborate creatures. But as it does, a totally new problem pops up. When you go from being a single cell to a complex creature with billions of cells, you create a massive, massive management challenge. I mean, just think about it for a second. You've got cells specialized for seeing, other cells for moving your leg, others for digesting your food. How on earth do you coordinate all of that activity in real time to survive out there in a crazy, unpredictable world? That's the control problem. That's the new challenge that complexity itself creates.
And here is the solution that evolution stumbled upon, step by step. First, you get simple sensors linked up to simple movers, like a spot that can sense light connected to a muscle that can move. Then you get early nerve nets that create more complex connections between those things. But the real game changer is centralization. It just turns out that having a central brain is a way better strategy for integrating all the information coming in and coordinating one unified response. It's a winning strategy that just keeps showing up in evolution because it's so darn efficient.
Okay, let's recap. We've got life. We've got complexity. We have centralized brains. But we're still not quite at what we call consciousness. The final piece of the puzzle seems to be a really ingenious new type of software, an architecture that runs on top of that brain hardware. Let's talk about the global broadcast solution. This is the key idea, so lean in. The global neuronal workspace. Imagine your brain is filled with countless unconscious little processors, all working in the dark, in parallel, handling stuff like your balance, your breathing, all that initial visual data. The GNW is the special network that sits on top of all of them. Its job is to take just one important piece of information, the winning signal, and then amplify it, hold on to it, and broadcast it out to all the other systems. And that broadcast, that single, sustained, system-wide message, that's what we experience as being conscious of something. So you have to ask, why would this evolve? Well, because it's a total game changer. It gives you a massive survival advantage. It solves the problem of how you get all these different specialized brain areas to cooperate on a single task. It lets you go beyond simple reflexes to flexible, deliberate action. You can plan for the future. And this is huge, you can learn from a single one-time event instead of needing thousands of repetitions. It's a serious upgrade for any creature trying to make its way in a complex world. All right, so let's tie this all together. When you follow this logical chain of reasoning, from the very first chemical reactions to the architecture of our own minds, consciousness starts to look a lot less mysterious.
So here it is, the entire story, boiled down to a really tight 4-step argument. Step 1. It all starts with chance chemistry, no magic. Step 2. The Darwinian engine gets going, taking random variation and using selection to build complex stuff. Step 3. All that complexity creates a massive control problem, which evolution solves with centralized brains. And finally, step 4. On top of those brains, consciousness evolves as a specific software solution, a global broadcast system for better, more flexible coordination.
So at the end of the day, what are we saying here? That consciousness isn't some ghost in the machine. It's an elegant piece of biological engineering. It's what you get when natural selection takes the raw material of random chance and shapes it into an architecture that is incredibly good at one specific thing: sharing information across the whole system so you can act smarter in a world that's always throwing curveballs.
And that brings us to our final, kind of mind-bending thought. If consciousness isn't some grand finale, but is instead just a tool that nature has built so far, it raises a really fascinating and pretty profound question. If it's an evolved tool, what problems is it going to be adapted to solve next? And what would the next version of consciousness even look like?